tomorrow, back to my Rocky Mountain home. Never no more will I ramble, never no more will I roam. I'll marry that Rocky Mountain sweetheart, settle down in my Rocky Mountain home.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Where'd the old town go? They moved it all north of here in a shopping mall.
Good morning and welcome to Old Town Cleveland here on WOOP FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at I started to say the interstate. www.
Only if you're wanting them to leave town.
WOOPFM.com.
I don't think you can pick us up on the interstate. Let's don't send them there.
Okay. You can call us here at 614-5553. And this morning, Deb, tell us about what we're going to do today.
We're going to be talking about the older houses in Bradley County, and we have with us P-Dab and Arnold Tarpley, and we're going to be talking about anything that you guys want to talk about too, as long as it regards to old buildings and houses. And we're glad to have everybody on the internet this morning and all active. And today is March the 9th. Did you turn the recorder on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going, did you turn the recorder on?
We heard you.
Okay. And we just wanted to kind of remind everybody that next week, please make a note to tune in. We're going to have the Snake Man, Harvard Steel-Owned, along with Robert Cheek, and they're going to be talking about life out on the 64 highway. And I understand that's going to include talking about the machine gun up on Snorts. Yeah. So that should be fun. I'd like to extend a happy birthday wishes to my sister Vicky. Today's her birthday. I only say
69,
that
right?
I only say that she's older than me. How's that?
She's 69.
And I have to say thanks. I think last week was probably one of our best shows ever. We had Freddie Hyde and his friends in singing live on the air, and it was just a lot of fun.
Well, I hate that because I wasn't here, and it's the best show. I really think when P-Dab and Arnold and I here will be a lot better show. But
it'll be a better show today, I believe.
Yeah. Hey, how you guys doing today?
Great.
I'm good.
Well, Arnold works with now. Tell what the official title stand. They've changed this.
Assessor of property.
Not the tax assessor.
No, we have nothing to do with taxes. We just assess the property.
Assess the property. Okay. Arnold brought us a list in. Deb started a new book here, and it's about the historical houses of Bradley County, and not just those up on Ocoee Street, which
we love.
They'll be in the book, but these are houses down in the country, down in the corners of the county. And Arnold just brought us a sheet here that had over 200 houses listed that's over 100 years old in Bradley County.
That's pretty amazing.
Now, some could be even a lot older than 100, right?
Go ahead.
This is the good guess.
This is the best guess that we can make in our office. Now, everybody's got to realize that we went on a computer system in 1970 to put our data into. And for whatever reason, the programmers of that computer system determined that there's no reason to allow any house to be older than 1900. And from an appraisal standpoint, that's probably very true, because a house that old has probably been remodeled a number of times, and it's what we call effective age or effective condition is far superior to a house that was built in 1900 and previous and never updated. But that kind of presents a problem for us, because we really don't know how old the house is for absolute fact. Now, later systems now allow older dates than 1900. If I found out an older date, I will put it in there, so we do have the actual record of that information.
So my research might help you.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
now-
I'll be sure to share all that with you.
Will the registered deeds have that property unless the records were destroyed back during Civil Wars times? Or
They'll have the record of when the property transferred, but not necessarily the age of the house.
okay. But if it was transferred in 1850, you can figure it's a pretty old house.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
pretty much prefigure that.
But see, sometimes you don't know if that's the house that they're talking about. So it's kind of a little bit of, you got to know what you're looking at kind of thing. P-Dab, what do you think's the oldest house in Bradley County? Just guessing. And I know you didn't live there.
Well, as far as I know, and from what I've heard, is the house on Blythewood Farm is the cabin of one of the Indian chiefs. It's
Conrad Hare?
Or Hare Conrad.
Yeah,
Which way
Conrad,
is it?
yeah.
whichever way you want to put it. History has it that that's probably the oldest existing home in Bradley County.
Yeah, it's behind. If you turn that off at what I call Jackson Lake.
Turn down Blythewood Road,
Yeah.
and it goes right past. Well, it's the third house
You're
on
listening
the.
to
on the left.
WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee.
Ron's
Whoop
elbow
FM
hit the
is a
board.
broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original
You
music.
can't touch that. Now, try it again.
It's really the third house on the left after you turn off of Harrison Pike. You've got the Jackson Farm, and then you got the Blythewood House, and then right past the Blythewood House on the hill there is a little, looks like a 2-room log house. Back in about 25 years ago, they rededicated that thing, and my dad's name is in there. He helped dedicate that, and ironic enough, they dedicated that on Saturday, and he died that night.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Well, now, Mrs.
Was the
Neal,
first sheriff live there?
first sheriff of Bradley County,
also
lived
lived in that house later on.
And then there's the Cooper Cemetery up on the back of the hill. If you call the office there at Blythewood Farms, and I think that's how it's listed in the phone books, and make an appointment, most of the time, especially if Mrs. Neal's around, she will open the cabin and let you see the inside of it, and you will get to see an authentic looking cabin on the inside. And you can also go up and visit the little cemetery up on the knob up there.
Yeah.
But that farm, the good news is that farm's been in history for a long time. And of course, Hare Conrad lived there. We think he may have built it. If he did, he was a very young man when he built it. And Harris Creek originally started out as Hares Creek, and it was over the years the name kind of got English.
Harris Creek. And then
Hare,
Harris.
H-A-I-R apostrophe S, and then it originally was made into Harris Creek. And occasionally you'll find a really, really old copy of a map from the early 1800s that will say Hares Creek on it,
Same
as
as
is Candy's Creek.
But it was Candy Creek.
Yes, it was Candy, as in the Indian that lived there. His last name was Candy, and it was Americanized too into Candy's Creek.
Candice Creek is the only creek that runs north and south.
Isn't that funny?
And runs completely through Bradley County.
Mr. Easterly that lived down in Black Fox was always laughing. He said, they talk about me living down in Black Fox, and he says, I remind them that the creek runs north from here. And so this is up and you're down.
Yeah.
Well, most Mouse Creek runs completely north, right?
Yes.
Right. So it's strange that we have where our water runs that way.
Where does Mouse Creek start, P-Dab? Over
It starts
by Mayfield?
It starts up
Purple?
next to Justice Center.
Yeah.
The new Justice Center?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Starts right in there. Well, that's part of it right there.
Okay.
Where,
Part of it is Baldwin
Like-
Branch.
Mm-hmm.
Baldwin Branch. Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's interesting, guys. I just want to remind everybody, too, that tonight's the time change. You need to spring your clock forward or you're going to be showing
We
up at
don't
the
get
wrong
to
time.
sleep as much this week, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And also the Dr. Seuss Day. For those of you who have small children or grandchildren, Dr. Seuss Day is going on this morning at Cleveland State Community College from 10 to 1 o'clock.
Deb, let me ask you a question. In your book,
Mm-hmm.
Arnold just handed you 200 plus houses, and there's other houses out there that to get from a history standpoint. I think you were going to try to back it up from 1940 backwards, but right now you've got 1900 backwards, 200. But what is going to qualify them to get them into your book? They're all these 200 houses need to be in there, but there's no way you're going to get all two. What will qualify them to get in your book?
Well, I'll keep adding them till I fall over, I guess. But no, actually, I think in reality, I'm going to be looking for houses that we can find a good, solid history on, and particularly old pictures of the house or the property or the people that live there. And then I want it to still be standing, although it can be abandoned or empty at this moment and kind of in sad shape. It will be a part of that preserving history. I'm thinking that probably in about a year, I'm looking at, I think, probably multiple volumes, maybe a northern and a southern sort of volumes. But I think I'm looking at communities like down on Spring Place Road at where Ladd Springs runs into Spring Place. There's an old white house there that belongs to Buddy Linville that I know that's pre-1900s, and you go a little bit farther down the road, and Lighton Whaley's house is still standing, although it's in sad shape. You go a little bit far, there's other houses along the way there. There's some railroad houses that sit on Spring Place Road. You get down to the Griffith house, that part of it is probably late 1800s, maybe earlier than that. The Newman house. So I'm looking for areas that I can find multiple houses, because I kind of would like to make this like in addition to the book, have like a map where you can drive and look at the things from the outside.
Okay, GPS locations.
Yes, yes.
Arnold, what's your favorite old house in Bradley County? Do you have one?
Not really. I guess I could say I have one favorite old house, and it was built in 1914. I knew the lady whose father built the house. And in my preteen and early teen and mid-teen years, I actually worked for this lady doing her yard and helping her do some of the housework. In the springtime when spring cleaning come along, I'd go up there and I'd spend the day cleaning windows for her. Miss Verna Wrinkle, who's a former school teacher here.
Where's that at?
It's on Centenary Avenue, up next to L.C. Rhodes, and on the upper end of Centenary up towards the Harle Avenue. And it was, I know from talking to her, everything in that house the day she passed away was the original stuff that was in the house. Toilets, sinks, everything. And it actually had in 1914, it had upstairs bathroom.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it was a very high quality house even in its day. And it was tremendous to go inside that house and look at
Who
it.
lives there now, Arnold?
I'm not. It's been sold 2 or 3 times,
Okay.
and I've kind of lost track. But that I always enjoyed that house just because I was so familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
P.
Mrs.
Deb,
Wrinkle.
do you have a favorite house somewhere you like?
Well, I'd have to say my grandmother's house.
All right.
Because we spent we got to spend a lot of time there, and I know that house has to be close to 100 or over 100.
Tell where it is.
It's right there in the corner of Mountain Road and Harrison Pike. That white house that's right there, and it's like all the rest of them. It's been added on to, and new siding put on it, and different aspects. It's got a metal roof on it now that which protects it real good.
Remodeling's okay,
Yeah,
especially when it protects what's underneath it. Go ahead.
and I can. To this day, I can't understand how, and I can't figure out how they raised 12 kids in that house. At the time they moved there, they was a 2-room house, and they added on to it, made another room on it, and
I always think if these walls could talk, how many people were born there, how many people were died there, got married in the front room.
yeah,
It's,
and there was 11 girls, and they all had a brother. So there's one boy.
that's something. Well, I know that last week on Friday night I was sitting at home and the phone rang and some gentleman says, "Debbie, And I said, hello, yes. And he said, this is Jack. And I said, Jack who? And it was Jack Baker, the president of the National Trail of Tears. Then I kind of got tongue-tied. I couldn't say anything. And he was wanting to know if I knew anything about those houses down on Dalton Pike. Well, I sent him an email about 2 pages long, and he and some other folks came up and visited some of the houses down on Dalton Pike and went by them. And it's an amazing neighborhood down there that we know. If the buildings aren't standing, we know who owned the farms. And when you have names like Otter Lifter and John Ross,
Judge Martin, and Black Fox actually owned an orchard over there too. It's a pretty amazing thing.
At my grandmother's place, the outhouse is still there,
still
in existence, and that goes to tell you it's not been too many years ago that they had indoor plumbing.
That's right. Or I had lived in houses before that there were outhouses out back, and it was always, well, if the plumbing ever freezes up, you'll be glad it's out there. And I'm thinking, nah, I'd be afraid I'd fall in. But down on Varnell Road, when you turn on Varnell Road like you're going to Black Fox School, the first house there on the right that has the little rock wall in the front of it, the Gateses live there now. Well, Sheriff John Heisinger lived there. And P-Dab said, well, sure he did. P-Dab, he died in 1909. And so he lived there. You go on down the road and you have the Varnell house, which is now that beautiful Black Fox Farms. The Campbell farm that we know the White House was built in the early 1920s. And then you get to Mr. Easterly's farm, and his house was built in 1915. There's a cabin there that was moved from Bendabout Farms that we think is the Southeast Preservationist. I took him there, and he said, probably 1870s at the latest, and Mr. Easterly really thought it was older than that. So we have a lot of hidden treasures here in Bradley County. Ooh, that's a good name for a book, isn't it?
Yeah. What's your favorite house, Deb?
Oh, it'd have to be the Martin house, and I've told this story before, and I appreciate everybody listening to me tell the same stories over and over again, but I was looking for something down on Dalton Pike. I was not looking for an early 1800s house. I was looking for something else, and I started looking at all these 1930s newspaper articles, and they were talking about the Judge John Martin, and he had a house down on Dalton Pike. Well, I go and I look through the gate at the house that I understood where it should be, and I said, well, obviously that's a 1900s house, and probably 1940s house, but it still wasn't old enough to be his house. Then I started finding later articles that were talking about the house being moved, and I went to Oscar Foster, Oscar Renner, that was 90 years old, his sister, Mrs. McCoy, that was 103 years old, and another sister that was in her 80s, and they all remembered the house being moved, and they told me where it was at. And so when I got to the house, it was indeed the original log structure that had been built onto. If you're going down Dalton Pike, it's right there at the Stevenson place, and it's sitting back off the road just a little bit. It's a beautiful white vinyl house now with a red tin roof on it, which protects it. I was really excited to see that. And we brought in Russell Townsend from the Eastern Band to tell him that we had found this old Cherokee house. And I said, we'll just turn around in the drive. And he said, okay. Well, as we turned in the driveway, he's opening the door to get out because he could tell it was an old house by just at the shape.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello, Ron.
Hey, Miss Ella.
I started to say, what's cooking?
Nope, that's no longer with us. Go ahead.
I know, and I hate that, too. I like them shows.
Yep. So what can we do for you this morning?
Oh, I just called in and tell you about last night.
Well, what did you do last night?
I went to Pokey's.
Oh, I thought you weren't going to Pokey's. I thought you were going to Angelo's tonight.
Well, I
changed your mind.
Yeah, and I was dancing with the best looking guy up there.
I wasn't there.
I know you wasn't. Anyway, I had to get down. I think I overdid it, though. I'm going to rest all day.
So you're going to have to rest all day so you can go back and get drunk again tonight, right?
Well, I just drank one beer.
All right, well. So you're going to go to Angelo's, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's all I do all month, for my recreation, so I might as well enjoy, my life.
Might as well go all out, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, that's
I
good.
probably won't dance as much as, though.
Okay, so this is drinking night tonight. So you're just
I
going.
want to say happy birthday to Pete Adams.
Well, thank you.
Well, P. Debs, this is your birthday?
Again.
Again. Well,
All
they
right.
come around fast now,
I know
don't they?
it.
He must be about 200 years old.
He enjoyed that.
Anyway, I'm listening to you.
Thank you,
All
Miss
right.
Ella.
Thanks,
Bye
Miss
bye.
Ella. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. But when you go down Dalton Pike and you pass the new school, on the left you see the old White House. Everybody always asks me about that two-story White
That's
House.
Campbell. Mr. Campbell owns that.
Mr. Campbell owned that, but Mrs. Campbell, that was 90, her dad, Mr. Westerberg, owned it before he. So that should give us some idea of how old that one is. And she told me all that before she died, and I wrote it down.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron and Debbie. How you doing?
Hey, Bullet. How are you?
What's up, buddy?
My father was born in 1912, and the house he was born in is still sits down on Blue Springs Road. It's called the Old Taylor House. It's the big two-story white house, and that tells you how old it is because it's born in 1912, and it's still there.
Where's
Okay,
it at?
is it north of the railroad tracks or south of the railroad
I tell
tracks?
you, Deb, you go across the railroad tracks and go south, and it's down there about a mile or 2 miles on the right.
Is it sitting real close to the road?
It kind of sits back from the road. I'll tell you what, let me check up on it for you, and I'll go down there and talk to the people myself and find out some information about it. But I think it's Old Taylor House now, but it's a big two-story white house.
Okay, that sounds great. And be sure that you write down the street address for me.
I will, and like I say, he was born in 1912, so he's about a...
Ooh, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for, Bullet.
Yeah, and do you have a picture of him out in front of the house?
I think I do.
Oh, that's great.
Bullet, I want. When I moved my office the other day, I found your pictures, and I'm sorry I haven't gotten them back to you, but I'll let you know when I get them copied.
Well, one I'm interested in is my Tommy Rich picture.
Oh well,
That's one in your camera.
that's the one that the data disc showed up last weekend. So I have the disc now, and I can make you a copy now.
Some,
Dave, one more thing. I've got some census papers that my dad kept, and it tells. I think it's got the address of down there where he lived on Blue Springs Road, and he was 6 years old.
I love it. I love it, Bullet.
Let me check in for you now.
You check on it for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll see.
Bye-bye. Now, folks, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I would have had no idea where to start on a house when I just drove by it. And so that gives me a
I
good...
believe that house might be a little bit off of the road, might be able to see it from the main road because my brother was telling me yesterday that Bullett's dad's brother, they live next door to us, and he drove him down there one day, and he said, I was born right up there. So he used to live right up there, and they drove back there and looked, and it's back off the road a little ways, I think.
Okay. I'm thinking of there's what I call a railroad house. It's got that four-sided roof on it that's sitting real close to the road. I think that's the one that got stuck in my head, but I am really interested in that house. And you know, Blue Springs Road used to run a little bit differently.
That's what's happened to a lot of the old houses, and if you can find all the old houses, if the road is still there, the original road, they were built within 20 or 30 feet of the road.
Yeah, because
not
they
on
get
the
too
road.
sloppy and muddy, and you
Yeah.
couldn't get to your house. Absolutely.
And a lot of the roads have been changed, and it left them abandoned over there. So
It did.
Now you try to get it off the road as far as you can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really.
Good morning. You live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hi, this is Hannah Evans.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. My Girl Scout troop is here at Bilo, and we're going to be here till 11, and we have plenty of cookies.
Which Milo are you at, sweetie? Are you at the one on Keith Street or the one on Dalton Pike?
Keith Street.
Keith Street. Okay, Hannah and the Girl Scouts are at the Keith Street Bilos, and they have a big supply of Girl Scout cookies. How long are you going to be there, Hannah?
Until 11.
Until 11. So
Oh.
you need to get in your car and
Hurry
go get
up.
your cookies now.
Hey, Hannah, what's your favorite kind?
The tag-alongs are the Thin Mints.
I like those little thin mints.
My problem is I have to try them all to see which one I like.
Thanks, Hannah. Good luck.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So go by and see the Girl Scouts up
You
at
got
Bilos.
35 more minutes to get there. Leave it on Whoop as you drive there.
Yeah, hurry, hurry, hurry.
All right, Deb, where was you finished your story?
I have no idea where I was at. I think I was down on Dalton Pike.
You and P. Deb,
Well, let me
got to
tell
the
you-
Campbell house.
Let me tell you about Judge John Martin's house. And so Russell Townsend looked at it. He agreed with me too. And we applied to the National Trail of Tears. We couldn't have it on the National Registry because it had been moved. Although they said I could argue about it, but the guys from the Trails of Tears just jumped up and down with Joey and said yes, that. But we could tell it was a really old house because where the logs fit into the logs on the side of the house, the Indians put a real straight, narrow, what would you call it? The end of the logs were real straight and narrow and fit into the other log where when the house expanded and stuff, it could move. The white folks had a tendency to kind of make it dovetailed a little bit, but the Indians would make it straight.
They mitered
and,
it in, like,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, and we most of the time the Indians used the old American chestnut. Of course, the white folks did too. But
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
How you doing, Ron?
I'm doing fine, Brett.
somebody online told me I was on Blue Springs Road. What's up, Brett?
How you doing, Dad?
I'm fine.
Ron,
Yeah.
don't forget Tennessee plays today.
I'm going to try to watch it.
The men play at 4, and the women play at 4.
Which one will I watch?
Better
Which one has a better chance to win?
Probably the girls.
Yes.
Ron,
Yeah.
hey, the women play for it's the Final Four,
Right.
and the men play for the championship.
Mm-hmm. Which is surprising to me, but Southeast Conference. Yes.
I talked to Mark, Ron.
Okay. Hey, hold on just a second.
Sure.
Okay. My favorite house is, and it was the Colonel Mee's house up in where's that area up there? It's in the north end, Chatta Valley.
Yeah.
There, that is a beautiful. I don't know all the history. Deb knows that history, and but I don't. But the house is gorgeous. The original smokehouse is behind there, and there's a guy, and Deb knows the family, but he restores old houses. Is what he's done. He's moved back in the area, so he's restoring that as a very historical house. If I win the lottery, I'll either try to buy that one or I'll build one just like it, or I would build the Craig Mile house. Would be my. I would love to have that house. It's just something about it says somewhere, and more. The Me house. Tell them about that. I'm trying to tell them that's the house I would build. I don't know anything else about it except it's a gorgeous house.
Well, I know that it was there during the Civil War, and we know that some of the generals in the area stayed there. And so it's very well documented that it was standing during the Civil War. It's been in the Sanders family since the 1950s, I believe. And Jack and Diane, that had lived there for years, have recently moved out, and their son moved in, and they were remodeling it back to its original condition. Now, if you think it's gorgeous from the outside, I think that probably in a few months when you see it on the inside, you really will be envious, because I saw pictures of the inside of just the smokehouse. Or the old outside kitchen, I guess it was, that they had remodeled into a modern but still looks authentic office. And it was incredible. There is a website that you can go to and follow the remodeling. I don't have that address with me, but I'll be sure to bring it next Saturday so that the folks that are interested can follow the remodeling of that. I need to get up there and see what the floor joists look like. I really am suspicious that it may be a lot older than the Civil War, and that but the Mees came into town. They lived there, and in the early 1900s or so, late 1800s, they got into the Coca-Cola bottling industry, and they moved into Cleveland. And when you go up Ocoee Street and you pass where they're tearing down the old J.C. Penney's and all that, and you go past the parking lot and the gas company, the very next house is the Me house. And they bought that. I mean, they built that in the probably 1890s or so. I don't have the dates right in front of me, but that's the Me house. And that when they moved into town, that's the house they moved into.
What's the oldest house on Ocoee Street?
Well, I know the one at 20th Street, the big white house. That's the
Has the columns,
The big huge columns. The big huge columns were added probably in the 50s or 60s. So the columns aren't original to that house. But we feel like it's way before the Civil War. It was probably original house in this area, if not right after the removal, during the removal. McClanahan house,
Yeah,
I believe it's.
Kate McClanahan.
Yeah. So, and then the little house there next door used to be the carriage house. Early 1900s,
Probably.
1900.
I think you'll find most of the houses in that area, other than the McClanahan house, probably very late 1800s to pretty early 1900s as your actual
Somebody
construction dates.
Somebody online here is talking about people remodeling and finding logs, and that happens all the time here in Bradley County, because people would have come in and when they originally got here and they built a one-room log cabin. Well, you didn't tear that down. You just built another room onto it and another room onto it. And in the 1960s, they put aluminum siding on the outside. And sometimes when people tear off things, they found these wonderful treasures underneath, which is what happened out in Georgetown at that big white house just inside Georgetown on the right. That was actually Chief George's house, and we know it's from the early 1800s. And they were getting ready to sell it, and they were doing a little bit of spiffing up on it, and they pulled off the vinyl siding, and there were those huge 18-inch logs.
My sister lived there for about a year.
In the Georgetown house?
Not long ago, and the ceilings in that thing are only about 7 feet. 6.5, 7 feet. Matter of fact, in one or two of the doors, I'd have to duck
Which
to go
makes
in.
me think it was a log cabin.
It was, and the log house. Buck Hughes, James Hughes, is the one that owned that and put the vinyl siding on it. He's the pastor of that little church right next door to it there. And,
How much do they want for that, P-Dab? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't
Ron's
know
looking worried.
I don't know who owns it right now, but it was the logs were exposed for a long time. Oh, I would say up 10 or 12 years back. It's only been covered about that long, and that was you had to scotch up every piece of furniture in it.
Yeah, because
the floors were like,
But that's because they would just use the big stumps off of those chestnut trees as their corners of the house, and over 200 years you start losing those, even though they're out of the weather conditions.
Yeah,
it's just nature.
They didn't have treatment back then for the termites and things, and they had to. It was just. I don't think termites will eat a chestnut, and that's when they use chestnut logs and for the bottom runners.
I'm there with the I don't eat chestnuts either.
P-Dubs, any of the big old chestnut trees, the old ones? I have some hybrids in my yard that my grandpa planted 50-something years ago.
They found
and
just
I won't cut them down yet.
They've just
I
found a
need to.
couple up in the Smokies. I mean, that's it. I mean, there's
When they were building the road down here where they're going to the new
Volkswagen
Volkswagen plant, they found a whole grove of them in there, and of course, they didn't last. I think the American Chestnut Society, which is located in Chattanooga, went and got some of them and was able to save some, but the bulldozers literally just took the rest of them. It was a grove of about 100, they said.
Oh, my goodness.
I know that there's a grove of probably the hybrids up on the 411 highway, and in the springtime when you get up there close to the bridge, you can smell them with your car windows closed.
Yeah, they don't smell good when they start getting into that.
But that was some of the prettiest lumber and
Well, I know
woodwork that there was.
In Bob Irwin's house, that's what all the floor joists are made out of, and they're huge.
See, that I can remember going through the woods, and you'd see a big white tree standing there. It'd be dead, but it'd be a big chestnut tree.
They were big trees.
Big. Oh, they would. Some of them be 3-4 foot through, and hey, they was magnificent trees. But they're all gone now. The fire got most of them, where fire would get out and burn them down. But
did you get something?
No.
Arnold, there's a house on Benton Pike all the way until the county line. I think we've asked you about that. Do you remember?
Yeah, I know which house you're talking about. I can't. The name escapes me as far as the ownership.
If you go all the way up Benton Pike, almost till you get to Polk County, it's right on the right. It looks like they're trying to remodel it. It's a beautiful old mansion looking like house too.
The first time I drove out through there after I got old enough to start looking at houses and during the job and everything, I never knew exactly what the age was of that house just driving by. But I sat there and looked at that and said, that's pre-1900 just looking at the brick.
Yeah,
And
I'd
it's
say
pretty
it's
obvious on that.
pre-1850s by
Yeah.
looking at the brick. And see, that's what happened with a lot of the old brick houses too. They didn't leave the bricks in the kiln long enough, and they would absorb water after a while.
That's
And
why
just,
they painted them.
that's why they painted them and tore them down because they were like sponges.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning, Ron.
Hey,
Let me tell you about some of the old houses out in the Eureka area.
who are we talking to? Just give me your first name.
Dog.
Dog. Yeah, I know you are. Go ahead.
All right. There's one of those old log houses that was covered up. It's probably got 3 layers of houses over it on the Tinsley farm. That now you know it as it's owned by Fazell Coleman. I believe he owns it. It's back of Wyloo Farm. And over on the Kansas Creek Ridge Road, Robert McPherson's home's still standing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's covered with asbestos. You know, those asbestos siding.
How old do you think that house is?
I'm guessing it's about 1880s by looking at I used to see the old chimney. I think they pulled the chimney down.
Yeah, you have to do that too, or they fall on you.
Yeah. I think it's probably in the 1880s.
Okay.
And those are the 2 oldest houses out here now that standing there. All the really old ones that was first built by the white settlers, they were standing in the 70s. I've seen a lot of them, but they've all gone the last 40 years.
Yeah, it's just got to be such an expense to fix them. Okay, when you're going out Eureka Road on the left, there's an old church building that's been turned into a house. Are you familiar with that one?
How far out is it?
Oh, less than a mile, I think.
We
drove through there last night, but she didn't tell me I had to have measurements last night.
Anyway, there's a white house, and it's got a square on each end and kind of a skinny part in the middle, and that, I believe, is an old schoolhouse. Then when you go out to Mr. Cantrell's farm, his mother-in-law's white house is there. It's probably pre-1900s or early 1900s. And then they have a cabin that was moved there from White Oak Mountain that he said belonged to the Carter family. And we think there's a Civil War story that goes with that cabin.
I didn't count that because it was moved here.
Yeah. Well, we may have to, like I say. Do you know who it belonged to, that cabin?
No, I don't.
Okay.
On Mr. E.L. Ross's farm, he had 2 outbuildings that were still standing that was built by his progenitor when they came to Bradley County in 1839. They were still standing a couple of years ago, but they were really in bad shape.
I think there's still little remnants of them there, and that's a shame that that they weren't able. The family, didn't take care of those because I thought that was original to that farm and really early. Now that's on the right side of Georgetown Road.
No, it's on Kansas Creek Ridge Road.
Yeah.
It'd be on the left going north.
Do you remember seeing the old historical marker that used to be out there for the Candies Creek Mission?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's gone.
I used to ride bicycles out there. When I lived in Cleveland, I'd ride out there to that area there looking for Indian graveyards.
Yeah. And there's plenty of them out there. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks a lot for listening.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye. If anybody else has information about an old house that was in your family, if it's still standing, no matter what shape it is, and if you happen to have a picture of it when it was with your daddy standing in front of it, that's a pretty good story to be told there, and just all we need is just your family story, and we can do some research and maybe find out a little bit more about the house. You can call us here at 614-5553. You can go to the internet today and listen to us at www.whoopfm.com, and there's also a chat room there. If you don't want to call, you can chat with Deb here as we do the show. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yes, this is Eddie Cartwright.
Hey, Eddie. What's up, buddy?
Earlier you were talking about Miss Verna Wrinkle's house on Secondary Avenue. That house was built by Mr. C.C. Card that owned the Ford distributorship here, a lot of years. And then Bob Card, his son, and now Easy Auto is Mr. Card's grandson. Anyway, he built that house and moved in it, and I don't know how long he lived there, but then he bought a farmhouse over on Church Street, and it's still in the Card family. It was a farm back then. Yeah. And the reason I know all this, I, of course, don't remember it. I'm too young for that. But Larry Presswood bought that house and lived there for a period of time, and he did the research on it. And he was telling us at the liars table the other morning, we were talking about your diving into all these old homes and going to write a book and so forth about it. And he commented that Mr. Card had built that house. So that's, if you want a little more history on it, Larry probably can give it to you.
Yeah, I need to chase him down. That's absolutely right. And your wife's out of the Wrinkle family, isn't she?
No.
Okay, never mind.
No.
I think the Card's house, that was originally, when he moved across the road at Church Street, I believe that house was the original that was there, at least during the Civil War, that Caswell Lee lived in. And I believe the Card family had to tear that old building down in the 1950s, and they built the beautiful house that's there now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Hey, Eddie, this is Arnold.
Yes.
You asked Larry if he had as much fun cleaning all those little diamond-shaped window panes as I did.
I don't know about that.
I know it's tedious work.
Right.
Eddie, where did you grow up, buddy?
I grew up by North Cleveland Church of God.
Okay. And you're still growing up, right?
Yeah, Magnolia Avenue, Mayfield School. That area was my original stomping ground.
Okay. All righty, Mr. Eddie. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling in.
The old house that I grew up in.
Oh, go ahead.
Lee University bought from my mom, and of course it's gone. There's a nice building on the corner where we live, but it's somebody there on the program, I forgot now who was talking about Miss Verna's house being one of the prettiest, his favorite house. Well, it was my favorite house. When Miss Verna died, I went to Arnold School and had her for a teacher, and let me back up. I didn't have her for a teacher. She was teaching there when I went there, but I didn't have her. But anyway, when she died, that house was on the market, and Miltine and I went by and looked at it. We always thought we wanted to renovate an old house, and it would have been an ideal house to do that to, but it was a little more than I wanted to tackle. It still had all the original stuff in it. There was a electric light cord that hung down from the ceiling, had a pull chain on it, and there was just an old wall-hung sink, and the cabinets were pieces of furniture like they used to have, where they'd have a flour bin and a meal bin and in the piece of furniture and all that. And most of the house, now it had really pretty oak trim. And somebody went in there after Miss Verna died and painted all that. And then Larry Presswood was telling me that when he lived there, it had all been stripped back to its original, all the paint was gone. It had been refinished. It's a fine old house. I still have thoughts that we probably messed up by not buying it and redoing it and living there, but we didn't. I'm enjoying your program.
Thank you, Eddie.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eddie.
Him talking about remodeling houses reminds me of when Bob Irwin in 1979, he and his wife were standing out at the Wilson house at the corner of Walker Valley and Wilson Farm Road. I'll finish this story if you'll remind me which one I'm telling when we come back.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning. This is J.R. Lavellette. We live on top of Deer Ridge right across from the Sanders place on Shadow Valley there.
Oh, yes.
We just built a log home a couple of years ago up there, and we can see all over from up there. There's a house that I've been looking at. It's on Old Bacon Road right off of Shadow Valley, and I don't know if you all know about it or?
Is it a white house that's sitting up next to the road?
Yes, it's right. You can see it from Shadow Valley, but it's on Old Bacon.
Yes. I drove by there and looked, and there's Danny and somebody's name on the mailbox. I don't know anything about it, but I can tell by looking at it that it's extremely old, and it is on my radar. And Jack Sanders has promised me to put me in the car and take me all over that valley. I understand that Israel Smith, our sheriff that was killed in the 1920s, his original home is still standing up in there. The house, Lester Goins' house, out on the road there that has the lake that had the little boat house there in the last couple of years, I believe it actually started out as an orphanage.
Wow. There's another place, I think it's an old church on Tesso, between Shadow Valley and Michigan. Have you seen that?
The old church, yes.
Okay. That's not a house. I think it's just an old church. Looks like it's starting to fall down. I don't know if anybody's going to take care of that or they're going to let it go.
There's several like that. Julian Chapel is one that really needs to be, it's one of the oldest in Bradley County, and it needs to be saved.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's why I just wanted to know if you knew about that house on Old Bacon. Cause
it's on my radar, and according to the list here, it belongs to William Dodson, and I'm going to get with them. I want to make sure that gets on our list. Thank you so much, and thanks for being a listener.
Well, it's a great program, and thanks a lot for having it.
All righty. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'll say it again. I love our callers. Go ahead.
One thing we don't want to forget is the outbuildings, the barns, the cribs, and the things like that. We've got one of the finest cribs still standing out on the Swafford Nursery Farm out there.
Yes. And there's a couple of houses right in there that people have already let me in on, too. Yep. And I have a beautiful picture of that crib during the fall.
Go ahead. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yes, I just wanted to say that the Liar's Table is a very appropriate place for Larry Presswood to be eating at. And,
there's a few others that are fit in that category.
I'm sure you're going to get around to it, but the Wrought House has, as Debbie knows, tremendous history, and I'm anxious to hear y'all talk about the Wrought House.
Sure will.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
I think P-Dab knows about it, the Rawls house.
The
Roth. I'm sorry. I was down in the country with you at the Rawls house.
Okay. Well,
let the phones ring.
Keep them both in there. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning. It's JR's girl.
Hey, JR girl.
Hey, I want to tell you the house you were talking about, the William Dotson.
Yes.
He is deceased, and that property belongs to his stepson and stepdaughter.
Okay.
But I can put you in touch when you're ready.
Okay, I'll
I see him on a weekly basis.
Well, let me ask you this: how old do you think that house is?
Oh, I don't know. It was a dairy farm. I mean,
yes.
I
think that one portion of the house is really old. You can tell them that I'm that person that's driving by their house really creepily slow, and it looks like I'm getting ready to break in or something, but I'm not. Because I've been sitting in driveways all over Bradley County. I'm surprised. Of course, I've had the police called on me before, but you know.
But yeah, I mean, I can put you in touch, and I don't know, if his stepson has books and stuff on maybe that house in that area. At one time, there was a book, on Shadow Valley and stuff like that.
Yes, I was looking at it this weekend. Mrs. Manley's book, I believe. Buggy Days of something. I have a Xerox copy of it. Of course, it's been out of print she's probably been dead 30 years. But it is wonderful. It is wonderful, and I think what she tells me, and between Mr. Sanders helping me, that valley through there is going to be a tremendous part of our book. And as Ron will tell you, we've been down through there several times. It is some hidden treasures out there.
Right, and a lot of them were dairy farms, which is now went out of business. Mm-hmm. Mr. Sanders and everybody that was rich in dairy, back in the day, that's what they did there. So.
Well, Mr. Oscar Renner was telling me about his milking parlors, and I didn't know what in the world he was talking about, but apparently he was quite quite innovative about the dairy farms and talking about how you had to have all this fresh water. Well, now that's kind of a bad thing to have a lot of loose water around on the property, but back then that was the the thing that you had to be close to those springs and creeks and stuff.
Exactly. That was how they didn't have coolant or anything, so they would. That was how that they would pull the milk down before the milkman would come get it. You know, in the milk cans, they would put it in a cistern that that had a spring in it.
Well, that's what the concrete springs are down at Flint Springs. When you turn off Dalton Pike onto Flint Springs Road, there's a concreted in springs there that has 14 different springs coming into it at Mr. Foster's house. Right. It used to be the old Reimer farm. Before that, it was the old Jones farm. Before that, it was the old Heiberger farm. Before that, it was Otterlifter's farm. But anyway, then down on the right, there's other springs there at Flint Springs School, and there's all these wonderful family stories about how the women in the family ran the dairies while the men did the farming, and they would have all their milk cans and stuff cooling there in those springs. They had spring houses over them that the tornadoes, unfortunately, in time has taken away. But that's how they kept the milk cool, and they loaded it on a wagon and brought it into town and sold it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Thank goodness for our dairy farmers, and I'm glad your family's still at it. Also, JR's girl, I think in this book, if there's barns and outbuildings around, I want to include them too. So kind of keep that in mind when you're making me a list.
Okay.
Love you. Bye-bye.
All righty. See you. Bye.
I just love our listeners.
Deb, the picture up here, tell us who that is.
The picture up on the internet is of the Robert Steele farm. It's just past Union Church out on Bates Pike. Mm-hmm. And he is 96 years old. He still farms that ginormous farm, and he moved there when he was like 6 years old. And I need to get out there and get his history down. His nephew, I believe it's his nephew, Snake Man's going to be here next Saturday telling lies. Giving us information. So that should be a fun day. I asked Mr. Steele to be on PDAB, and he told me I'd have to call his boy and get his boy to come on.
Robert.
Well, I think he's in his 70s. His boy.
He's the same age I am. Yeah, he's pretty old, but they are nice people. They really
are. And I love when Mr. Steele calls in and talks to us. But he only calls in on the winter months because the rest of the time he's out on his tractors. But his farm, I just sit and stare at it when I go out. I took this picture from the cemetery, looking down on his house. Now on the screen, for those of you who can see it, we of course have what we commonly know as the Jackson House.
Yeah.
And before that, it was the
Reeder.
Well, it was Reeder during the Civil War, but the guy that owned the flour mill,
Sykes
lived there and owned that property and sold it to the Jacksons. Now, I have a picture of it that's an original old picture from the 1940s that was made before this was remodeled, and it was red brick and had gasoline lanterns hanging down on the porches. I think probably this might have started out as just a cabin, but I know during the Civil War that Mrs. Hardwick from her house, which was Fletcher Park's at now, watched some short battles, people shooting at each other. I wouldn't call it a battle, but it's people from the different sides shooting at each other at the Reeder house. And there's also reports that people that lived in this community that were from both sides hid in their cellar while the fighting was going on outside. So this house has a very vast history. It's the White House when you're going out Harrison Pike that has the beautiful springs and lakes around it. We have found pictures over the years of people being baptized in those concrete enclosures there that are the lakes. PDAB remembers the mill. Tell us about the mill.
Well, I don't remember the exact mill, but I can remember the remnants of the dam. My dad used to cross the creek there, and he would carry me on his back across the old dam. And the old mill race, part of it is still there. And if I'm not mistaken, where Harrison Pike Bridge is now is where the mill sit right in there.
So the dam would obviously be going across the creek, and so that's how you got from one side of the creek to the other. Now, how wide was that dam? Was it just wide enough to walk across? And there was a bridge somewhere else?
I never did see the original dam. This where it had fallen down and it had sticks, part of the timber sticking up where they had dammed the creek up. But it was a pretty good size. It was 40 feet across. It is 40 feet across that one spot.
There's a name that's popping in my head like Littleberry Moore or something like that actually ran that mill originally, or a mill in that exact area. As we know, with all these beautiful streams and creeks and stuff, about every 2 or 3 farms had a mill.
Unfortunately, we don't have any mills left, though.
We have absolutely no mills left. However, someone keeps telling me there's one up on the north end of town, and north end of Bradley County.
A mill still standing?
And so they need to help me find that. And I don't even remember who it is that told me that. They always say, well, it's on the so-and-so farm. Well, I don't know what that is.
Have you found that?
Somehow people think
with that one.
People think that I know everything, and I know
she only
nothing.
thinks she does.
No.
Closest one that I know of that's got any remnants of any kind of like that is down on Mr. Easterly's farm.
Yes, he still has his old mill wheel, or his family does now. We've lost Mr. Easterly now.
I think that they generated electricity off of that.
They did. There was and still there.
Yeah.
A big portion of a race is still there. It carried the water from the Drumgoogle, which is another Indian name, stream that was there. It ran quite a long distance. It came in there, and it was the water shot over the top of the wheel and made the wheel turn. The big metal wheel from the 1930s is still standing there. And it's a work of art, and I appreciate so much that they have saved it. Matter of fact, Jack and his daddy in the 1980s, I think, cranked that thing up and ran it. I wouldn't do that now because it's getting a little bit of age on it. I understand there was a metal wheel just like that down on the Reimer farm in Flint Springs until probably it just finally collapsed. Anyway, it would turn, and they had insulators hooked to the trees, and some of those you can still see the tip where the trees have grown around them, and it ran a wire up to the house, but they didn't generate electricity for lights for the house or anything like that. They had a ginormous churn that everybody from the community would bring their milk at a certain time and put it in there, and they would run the churn with the electricity, and then they got a portion of the products that came out of the butter that came out of there. Also, that was the original site of the Varnell Nursery.
Yeah.
It's over on the highway now. Once they put the highway in the 1930s, they moved the nursery over there. But that was the Easterly farm was bought by the Varnells, and that was his great aunt and uncle. And they built the house in 1915 that's standing there. They tore down an old Indian hut, as Mr. Easterly called it, and put up that beautiful white house. Just a, common little farmhouse, nothing fancy about it. They did lose some of their old barns there in last year's tornado, which breaks my heart. But anyway, they did the electricity just for that, and also the electricity was used when there was droughts to pump water from the creek that runs through there over to the fields that had the trees and the bushes and stuff growing.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, Deb. It's Joe.
Hey, Joe. What's up?
Not much. Do you know anything about the old Laster's old home down there on Old Corey Street?
What's the name of it?
Laster's.
No.
Well, Rod Clayton's got that thing now, and I can remember back when I was young that thing was there, and I just wonder how old that was.
Now tell me where it's at again.
Yeah, you know where the South Cleveland Church of God used to be?
Yes.
It's right across the street, right there on the corner where you turn back.
Is it the one that's got the round part of the building on the outside?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have looked at that. I think it's probably early 1900s because that road was built in the 1900s. I mean, like 1900. And so I'm thinking that all those houses down through there are early 1900.
Well, the Lasters used to have something to do with this Charleston hose mill down there. Eva Laster.
Okay.
Her family.
Uh-huh.
And I was just wondering how old that was.
I'd say about 1900, just guessing.
Mm-hmm. All right, I won't be down there this morning bringing you them pictures and stuff I was talking about.
Okay, Joe. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Hey, P-Dab, how long's the lake's been in front of Jackson Lake? Have they always been there, or when were they built?
I think Sykes built those because they were always called Sykes Lake, and that was before my time. Mm-hmm. Now the road used to go between the lakes and up by the side of the house, and Ray wanted the road moved out close to the house. Well, the county didn't have any money.
Sounds
And he said,
was that last year?
that was yesterday. But he said, well, I'll build the bridge if you'll move the road.
Mm-hmm.
So Ray built the bridge, paid for it himself and everything to get the road built where it's at now. And you can still see the old road bed, and it's there's a walkway right on going up to the house between the rock wall.
I have an old postcard that you can see. You can you can. It doesn't exactly show the road, but you know that there's a road there, and it's different. I could tell it was
And I can remember when they built the Harrison Pike, that was the roughest. And my mother had to go to church every time the doors was open. And it would rain, and they was doing construction work on that road, and we had an old, back then I think we had an OA model, and that thing would get stuck in that mud. And, well, Ray would let people come through his backyard and come through his yard and down through the old road to avoid all of that right there where they'd fill that dirt in. And so it's Ray was a good community person.
He was. And I want to talk about that barn when we come back. Folks, thank you so much for calling in and tuning in this morning. We always appreciate you, and we're going to take a couple minutes to pay some bills here and do some station ID and let our advertisers do their thing, and we'll be back with you in about 3 minutes. Or 5.
How'd you like that for a station break? It was, nothing worked.
Nothing worked. How about that? So I think we'll just keep talking then. Are we on?
It shows it's playing, but
We'll have to play. We'll have to work on the credit today.
okay. Well, maybe we're playing, maybe we're not.
No, we're on the air, I think.
Are we talking? We're talking, but nothing's playing.
Ron is lost on the board.
Well, you know, it says this is where you do it, and so it didn't play.
Well,
so
at any rate, PW,
Never mind.
2 stories about Jackson Lake, and then we'll go on to something else. I remember Mr. Easterly telling me that when he was a little boy, his daddy got paid to bring his mules. His mules got paid $1 a day each, and he got paid $1 a day to rebuild the road out there.
Oh, okay.
But they paid the mules.
All right, that didn't work either. How's that? All right, so we're doing really good here now. 3 things hadn't worked in a row.
Welcome to Whoop, where things work most of the time. Am I on the air?
I guess you are. Did you hear yourself on the radio out there?
Arnold's just sitting here smiling like a bird fed cat.
Arnold, someone who has an old house.
Someone has confirmed that we are talking.
Okay, is that a good thing or a bad thing, or what is it when it becomes to your? Let's see what's going on here. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
This Ron?
It is.
Yeah. Hey, we got you now. Go ahead.
This is Pauline. I just want to let you know you're coming through loud and clear.
Well,
Okay, great. We tried to turn the commercials on, and they didn't play.
I heard that.
I don't think anybody wanted to hear them. They just sort of
That moment
powered
of
them off.
silence. Okay, thanks, Pauline.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing that they have an old house? What's the pros and cons of owning an old house, in case someone's wanting to buy one here this week?
Well, something Eddie touched on a while ago was remodeling expense, because I know everybody's seen the construction work on North Accoy Street over the years. The old houses being remodeled, stripped out. You've got to be careful with that stuff, because you can spend twice the money you buy the house for easily, and probably twice the money you spend to build a brand new house remodeling an old house, because not only do you have the remodeling expense, you've got the demolition expense. You've got to take out all
And then
the
you
stuff.
never know what you're going to find behind those
Exactly.
walls.
You might get in there. I know a friend of mine that was remodeling his old home place in Decatur. And once he got into it, got everything down and stripped down and spent a whole bunch of money on it, and all of a sudden he had to jack up the house and put all new joists underneath it because they was all rotten and termite ridden. So, he got into a whole lot more. So do your homework before you get into it. But it's also really neat because there's so much stuff in the old houses that you cannot reproduce today.
That's absolutely right.
Hold on a second. Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
Diana Kelsey. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Diane. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I've really enjoyed listening to you guys.
Well, tell us about your house. She lives in the house at the lakes out on Shade of the Valley, right?
Well, yeah. What's left of them? Well, I mean, the tornado came through and it really sort of did us in. I heard you talking about the boathouse and the spring house here, and I'm sitting in front of it right now, and it's just, that's our next project is to try to look at, the lake and the spring house. And, I heard you talking about one house where the Jackson Farm, I guess, where they would baptize people. And, what's so special to this house for me is I was baptized in this lake in front of the house as a little girl.
Isn't that fun?
And my future goal is to fix it up where, if somebody wanted to have a baptismal service again the old-fashioned way, it might happen. But I was listening to the guy talk about owning an older home, and it's really if you try to preserve what's there, it's really hard to do sometimes, and there's a lot of upkeep. But our house, what I think is so unique about it is the rafters and the main part of the house are still, they're those cedar poles. We look up, you can go up in the attic and just see those old, just cedar poles that are old.
Now, Diana, do you think that your house is the old orphanage?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is. We have in June, the orphans have a reunion the second week of June. And what was so funny was one morning, Terry and I, when we first moved out here, we got up and there was a bus over on Shade Valley. It had a bunch of people in it, and they were all stopped looking at our house. And so we went over and started talking to them. So they come the second week of June, and they come and we sit on the front porch, and they tell us stories about when they lived here. And
What year was your house built?
Debbie, I am not quite sure. We had found a document. Terry had said, I haven't seen it, but they said there was a document that had 1899 on it. I'm not real sure, but I don't know.
I think there was an old house there in 1899. I'm not sure it's still your house or part of that may be on there. Diana, what we need to do is we need to bring our video camera out and set up in your house somewhere where it's fairly quiet. And when you have the folks that used to live there, the ones that want to, I would love to interview them while they're there. So
that would be good.
You catch me on Facebook and let me know when it is, and we'll get Will recording. You can, and now that everybody's listening, let me give you my address and my email address in case somebody out there has a house they want to tell me about. My mailing address is Debbie Moore, of course, at Post Office Box 981, Cleveland, Tennessee, 37364. And my email address is bradleyfolks@aol.com, or you can reach us on Facebook too, or just call us right after the show and I'll take down your phone number. But Diane, I'm so excited about featuring your house. Do you have any old pictures of it?
Marty Powell has a beautiful hand-painted oil picture that I've talked to her a couple of times about it. I have some, but Debbie, what's really unique is the barn that's out here. The old barn still has it's pegged, and when the tornado came through, we lost a lot of the roofs, but we've gotten that repaired. But
good.
I'm telling you that barn is really a sight to see, the way it was put together. And no, I have some pictures, and then we've gotten, some information. People that know that we live here, they'll give us stuff. But I didn't know if you had heard of this wall that's supposedly called the Chatta Valley Wall.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that it has, now I've got some information on that it has some old
hieroglyphics.
Yes.
Is that the same wall as the Hooper on the Hooper farm?
I don't think so. If you
Okay.
Google the Chatta Valley Wall, it'll come up, because I had some of my some people that I know were asking me about it, and I've got a little bit of literature on it. But that's a pretty unique story for the area.
Well, I think there's no doubt that that area is going to be a big portion of at least one of the books, because it really is an old road, and there's a lot of houses up in that area. So,
what was
if
the old road that was torn down?
The old road.
I mean, old house on the left past Friendship
Road. The Hope Farm that was.
Yeah.
The Hope. It was blown down in 1970s during a tornado.
Yeah.
But the foundation's still there, and I think there's old houses of that picture still around. And then there's another Hope house there. Well, you just rally all your friends in the community and get them to dig their stuff out. And as soon as I make it past this documentary, I'm going to be working on that a lot.
Well, y'all are doing a great job, and I sure do enjoy listening to you. Keep up the good work.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Diane. Bye-bye.
Oh.
I made a little list of all the old homes and buildings that in the community that I could think of. Cason Place, that's the one right across from Mount Olive Church of God right there. That was the Eddie Cason Place. Excuse me. And Scoggins Place. And Old Osmond Place. That's over on the old Harrison Pike. Some of the Earls family owns it now. It's a very old 2-story house.
Over there close to Earl Cemetery.
It's on the old part of the road.
Yes.
Across the road.
Yes.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Yeah, this is T. Bandy.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Bandy.
I'm called to let you know I'll be singing this Thursday at the senior citizen.
Okay.
Me and Janie.
Okay.
Or Janie and I. How's that?
Both of you. This Thursday at the Senior Center at 10 o'clock?
Yeah, 10 o'clock.
Public's invited, seniors or not, right?
Everybody's invited. No, you're talking about some old houses out on Shady Valley. Now, Wilson Ledford sold that old big house to Lester Goins. Lester lived in that old big house up there when my sister got married to Gene Gates.
Uh-huh.
And he lived up in a little house on the creek. They tore it down
Okay.
above that brick house. So Lester lived in there back when Dot and Gene got married.
Mm-hmm.
And Wilson Ledford had a barber shop there beside that big column house.
Oh, okay.
And they tore it down and built a little old brown house out there for Harvey Bourne that drove a milk truck for him.
Uh-huh.
Handling them cans. And the house out there where the tornado went through it, that house that looked like a barn.
Yes.
Wendell Powell used to run a creamery there in that big brick house.
Uh-huh.
Wendell Powell, Widger still owns that, I reckon. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to have to get you in the car too, T, and let you take me, or let me take you around, and we'll write down some of this and see if we can't.
Yeah, now,
Jack Sanders has offered to help me, and
Paul Sanders lived in the house most of my Darien days. He was a school teacher at Charleston.
Uh-huh.
Jack lived over on a hill across the creek, back on that hill over there for a long time. But till Paul died, I don't know when Jack moved in that brick house, but I know Jack used to live up on the hill.
Let's go over to the next valley. I know that when you were growing up, T, you lived over on the Moore farm, at the house at Rattlesnake
Rattlesnake
Springs. Tell us about that house.
They killed so many hundred rattlesnakes out from under that house.
But now, did the house I think that's there right now was built in 1912, and it looks like it's about.
That's before my time.
Yeah, I know that's before your time. But did the spring come? How did they have the spring there at the house? Did the house go out over the top of the spring?
And now the porch did. It had a porch on the end of it, and enclosed with concrete. And now we used to haul the milk when I was there in there. We used to haul it over in that big spring and in them cans and put it in the spring. Had a cart we hauled it on.
How cold would that spring be?
How what?
How cold would that spring be?
Real cold. I don't know. It's cold enough to keep the milk cool till the milkman got there.
That's pretty cool, especially during the summertime. And there's lots of water comes up out of that spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now there's another spring over next to the railroad too that comes down to Jack Moore's place there.
Yeah, I think that may have been
Rattlesnake Springs too. It's right under the railroad over.
It is.
I used to live in an old house right there next to that. Well, you could put a whole cross tie in.
Wow.
Our place, and it's still standing.
Oh, okay.
But
what about T on the Moore farm? Mr. Moore that live. I guess that's where the oldest Mrs. Moore lives. There's kind of like a white house down in the dip there.
Yeah, that's.
How old do you think that house is?
I don't know. It was there when I was 5 years old, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'm 78.
Okay, so I probably need to get with them too. So there's places that they're kind of in little patches, and so we're going to be able to make a nice driving tour for folks just to drive by and look at things.
And, I'll go with you one of these days.
Okay, well, when it gets a little bit warmer and we got Ron to drive us and we can sit in the back seat and point and talk at the same time, we'll do that.
But I just wanted to let you know I remembered Paul, Jack's daddy, that lived in that old house, and they had a big one of them big old brick smokehouses out there behind it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure.
Or not.
I think it was there not too long ago. Yeah. Now the tornado kind of got them too. I think it.
Yeah, it went through there. Yeah.
And the sad thing about that is the tornado comes through and it ruffles up the roofs on these old buildings.
Yeah.
And people don't replace them because it's just too expensive. I think that.
I know it got Robert Hampton's.
Yes, it did. And if you don't replace the roof right away, these old buildings just lay down on us.
They just lay down. Yeah,
they sure do.
If you don't live in a house, it'll go down. I mean,
it goes down quickly. It sure does.
Yeah, they get some on to they claim. I don't know.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Thanks, T. Have a good day. And everybody go listen to T and Janie next Thursday at the Senior Center at 10 a.m.
All right, go ahead, Pete. What do you have?
All right, on the Rollins farm out there is they've got one of the biggest log barns that I know of that's left standing. It stands up on the hill there, and it's still in good shape. It's got a metal roof on it, and it's still in good shape. And there's also the Rollins home place right on White Oak Road is an old house. It's an old log house that's been covered up, and Fred Rollins moved from Greene County down here to that place, and then his brother Jake lived behind him up next to the mountain up there. That's an old house, and then Jake's boy Jack lives on down White Oak Road, and they was an old farmhouse there. They've since remodeled it. His son lives in it now, and there's a little cabin on Shingle Hollow Road up there in White Oak that now there used to be a shingle factory there. They cut shingles out of.
Oh, okay. See, that's the kind of thing I want to include in the book. Shingle Hollow Road.
Good morning, live on Old Town Cleveland.
Ron, I have a question.
Sure.
What happened to John?
The official statement from Whoop Radio is that they are changing the morning programs, and John will not be part of it.
Well, I think it's pretty dirty poo myself.
Well,
I don't have any comments about that. I have to be quiet.
Well, I'll tell them what I say.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure you will, and I think the programs are changing on during the mornings and the day. Doug Mizell will not be on Friday. John will not be on Tuesday and Thursday.
Well, I don't care about Doug Mizell. I like John.
Well, I just letting you know what's going on.
All
right. Thank you, hon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What about the go ahead, finish that list.
On the Shingle Hollow Road, there's a little 2-room sawmill cabin. And used to be, when he was living, he was a friend of ours, the Withrow family. And that's where he started raising his family. The best I can tell, they would go and set up camp on the mill site, and they would build a little cabin for their family to live in. And that's where one of the Withrow boys was born, was there in that, and that little cabin is still standing today. And I've tried my best to get some of the lumber off of it, just to build something out of it and call it that. But they're kind of afraid to. On kind of the man that owns it now is kind of funny about stuff like that. But we go on down the list. The Hickman place, where Austin Hickman lived, over against the mountain, right across the ridge from Elkmont Church, right down at the foot of the hill. That's a pretty old house. That's where Austin raised his family, was right there. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Simpson owns that now. And they went in and remodeled the whole house there, but it still looks original. It's a big 2-story job. And yeah, and you go on, we talked about the Collins log house up there in Ball Springs. I drove down there yesterday just to see if there was anything left, and if there was anything left, the tornado got it.
Mm-hmm.
It blew everything away. That used to be a swinging place.
Oh yes.
And that's where my mother and dad started out housekeeping. That's where they went and spent their honeymoon. Was right there in one of the little cabins, and I think all of her sisters may have spent time there too. They got their feet on the ground, or they didn't have to have much to get it on the ground back then. But there's just a lot to. While I'm talking, we just got through tearing down a barn that was 105 years old. We tore it down one piece at a time. We've got every piece of it.
Where was it?
It was over on the Swafford Nursery Farm. It was about to fall, and he gave it to my brother to tear down, and he spent about a week tearing it down.
Which one you're talking about? There's
the big red barn right there on the road, and he's got every piece of it there in the yard. Pulled all the nails out of it, and it all stacked up.
Was it a cantilever barn, or was it just a regular barn?
It's just a regular barn.
Okay, well, there's a cantilever barn out on Bates Pike, and you can't see it unless you know exactly where it's at, and it's over on Dr. Fox's old farm. Dr. Fox is now deceased, but the family is keeping it up. But it, like the one that I think Diana was talking about, they still had the big pegs in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, supposedly through the family history, which Fox man built it, and he died in 1861. Yeah. So we know it's a pre-Civil War, and it's cantilever, although they were very wisely went ahead and put up metal posts just in case she starts drooping after that long.
Well, that Rollins barn is cantilever.
Okay.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to buy any of that lumber, it's for sale. Mm-hmm. I mean, to make frames out of, or you can do anything with it. It's still in good shape. Mm-hmm. No lumber is. It's
okay. Tell me about someone. After we mentioned this a few weeks ago, someone contacted me, and I thank her for calling me. She was interested in the Barger farm that's just off Highway 60 on White Oak Valley Road, and when I went out there, I was absolutely thrilled. What do you know about that place?
I went in that place when they were remodeling it, and the walls, they built that out of 1x12 boards, sealed it with 1x12, and they didn't. They just butted them up against each other. They didn't overlap them or anything, you know. And I told that guy that was remodeling, and I said, what are you going to do with all this? He said, well, I'm going to tear it down and redo it all. I said, you're not going to destroy that. I said, you're going to put it back up like it was. He said, it's close to possible. So inside is as much like original as it could be. And I know he done a lot of work outside. It took them a year and a half, 2 years to finish that thing. And they put a good roof on it and everything.
It's White Oak Valley Road, and it's right off of Highway 60. And
it's just right it's right between the Misty Ridge.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's right in the middle of Misty Ridge.
And they have, I guess, put white vinyl siding on and red roofs, and all the outbuildings match. And it was just, I just wanted to go move in.
Well, you see how close it was to the road.
I was so excited. But now I couldn't find very much else out in that community to go with it.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Hello there, Ron.
Hello.
I lived in a house there at Rattlesnake Springs.
Who is this?
Bernice Wade. I'm Elizabeth Wallace's sister.
Okay, go ahead.
I lived in a house there by the dairy barn, Little Red House.
Mm-hmm.
I was living there when Booty Moore and his son got killed in an accident.
Okay, in the 1950s.
Yes, ma'am. And then when we moved out of that, we couldn't get across that unless we went on foot log when that spring got up and it rained. My kids would get out in that water and hunt duck eggs. Yeah, and I lived up in the edge of the woods back up in there for a long, long time in a house that had a brick and concrete floor in the kitchen. But I lived there for years and years and years. I know all about the Moores. They was good people, and I know where the spring is. My kids has been in it. My kids has been around it. My daughter's 64 years old right now, and that was when she just started to school.
There are no rattlesnakes up there, are they?
I never seen a rattlesnake. I saw snakes, but I didn't see a rattlesnake.
That's good.
Never saw a rattlesnake anywhere there, and I lived there for years. Kept running the dairy.
I'd say they probably just got killed out over the years, and because probably people didn't really appreciate them.
Yeah, I know. I didn't like them no way.
That's right.
Hey, Bernice, I can't see your number here, and I don't want you to give it out over the air. Do you think you might can send me a note in the mail with your phone number on it?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
wait a minute. Ron's just going to take you off the air and let me write it down. Okay. Hang on.
Thank you for calling.
Okay, hon.
You got to push the phone button there, Deb. All right. Arnold, you real quick there. You was remodeling the house. Does it cost you more money in taxes or less money, or does the remodeling? What does that make happen to the house?
As far as what we're concerned with, we're just concerned with the market value, which means what the house sell for on the market today. If you spend $1 million on that old house and they only bring $250 on the market, we're only going to do a $250,000 appraisal. You know that the cost of remodeling the house is something that is there, but unless the market recognizes, we're not going to recognize it. The appraiser's not going to recognize it.
If it was a $25,000 house and now it's worth $250,000, it will affect your taxes.
That is correct. So it all hinges on the market value. Mm-hmm. So don't be worried about spending a lot of money on an old house and it's going to raise your taxes a whole bunch. It's just going to go to market value. But the thing of it is, when you sit there and look at how much money and effort and blood, sweat, and tears you may have put into it, it doesn't equate to market value. You may not be too happy about that either.
Like I said, but if it was a very old house and the siding's gone off of it, and then you come there and put new siding on it and pave the sidewalks, and all of a sudden you put a sign on the front of it for sale for $250,000. Possibilities your taxes could go up then, right?
It might possibly do that.
Just want to be fair to everybody to let you know that that could do that.
I was telling a while ago about Bob Irwin. In 1979, the old Wilson house at the corner of Wilson Farm Road and Walker Valley Road went for sale. And his wife had always talked about getting an old house and remodeling it. So they met the real estate agent there. And when the real estate agent said, he said, I knew I was in trouble and I was buying that house when the real estate agent said, well, if the owner would just let me tear down this old house here and put up a new house or just sell the lot, boy, I could get a lot of money for it. And his wife's heart sank to her feet, and she says, we're buying this house. And it's been a 30-year. You don't buy an old house and remodel it. It's like adopting someone.
You invest.
You invest your blood, sweat, and tears, and that is a beautiful old house. The oldest part of the house we think is 1826. We think it. We don't know. We know that a general stayed there, but it wasn't anybody that you'd recognize their names because there were a tremendous amount of troops just north of there on the big farmlands, which in the 1830s, they also housed the Cherokees there inside of an enclosure before they removed them. So that farm has an enormous amount of history. And there were also Noah Wilson's house was sitting up there close to the barn that has the quilt painting on the outside of it now at Ginger Wilson Buchanan's farm. Noah Wilson that ran a drugstore, I believe, in Charleston, his house was right there, and in the 1970s they had reached that point that no one in the family could afford to or wanted to invest in the time. When they tore it apart piece by piece, Joe Bryan bought the house and tore it apart piece by piece, took it to Calhoun and put it together. Well, all the fancy woodwork in the house had the name William McKnight on the back of it. Apparently he had proved every board that was going to go in his house, and I found him throughout history. He must have been quite the character.
Hey, folks, you're listening to Whoop FM 99.9, or you can go to the internet at www.whoopfm.com, or you can call us there at 614-5553.
And one thing I want to point out is, even though I work for the assessor of property and everything, and I know all the ins and outs of that end of it, I also lived in a house that was bought by my grandmother. The house was originally built in 1926 in the historical district of Cleveland, and we lived there for quite a few years ourselves after we bought it. My dad bought it for my grandmother. And one of the interesting things about that house is we totally remodeled that house over a period of 35, 40 years. And that includes taking down the original woodwork, stripping it, redoing it, and putting it back in its proper place. It had the old windows on pulleys with your metal weights on the other end to counterbalance it and everything. We took all those apart, restrung the ropes, and put them all back together in original working condition. And so everything...
It would have been easier.
It would
to just put in modern windows.
Yeah, it would have been easier to go through the process of taking everything out and starting over. But the house looks exactly today the way it would have looked the day it was built.
And where was it?
This was Millen Avenue over in just over from Arnold School.
Good morning. You're live on Old Town Cleveland.
Good morning. This is Tanya Brantley.
Hey, Tanya.
Hey, real quick, Debbie, you know the house that they tore down next to me here on Oak and First Street?
The Higgins house,
Well, yeah, years ago, I don't know how many years ago it was, but we had found out, went up to the Register of Deeds and found out that the records only went back to 1920.
Yes.
I believe. And so I was thinking that house, my house, and the one next to me here on First Street are all right around 1900 or earlier, just a little bit. And my thing that I was wondering about, I don't know if you've talked about it already this morning, is that house that was there, before they tore it down, it was in just a bad shape. And the owner was elderly. They're elderly. And they were unaware at the time that there are grants available for indigent and elderly folks that own old houses that can actually fix up their home. Do you know anything about that?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Because usually if there's something good to be done, you can't find grant money to do it. We have the Getty Mill just across the McMinn County line that's absolutely gorgeous, and the Calfee family's trying to keep it standing. We can't find any money to help with that.
Okay.
You know anything about that, Arnold?
Not as far as historical. I know that they do some different things through different programs to weatherize and do some things like that. But nothing that I know of to really redo an old house and bring it back to what it ought to be. That's pretty much on your own and with your own devices.
Right. What was needed on that home mainly was a new roof, and if it had the new roof, then the walls wouldn't have been saturated when it rained, and if they had caught it in time, they could have saved it. Because I don't know if you remember, Debbie, when they tore it down, it took, they did it bit by bit, and over the course of, I guess, 2 weeks, it got down to the skull and bones of it, and it had a log cabin inside of it. So it had been there for quite some time. It started out as a log cabin, and they just kept building around it, and it was just fascinating to see it come down, but sad at the same time.
It is sad, and I was very disturbed when we got down to that log part, and I could see the hand-hewed logs, and I think it was probably that portion of the house was quite a bit prior to the 1900s, and I think it's sad that we lost it. And I believe someone out of Creel Higgins and Randall Higgins' grandparents may have lived there. I know that Mr. Higgins knew a lot about the house.
Yeah, well, Miss Hazel Taylor lived there for years and years. She rented that house from the original owner, and they're still alive, the owners are, and so is Miss Hazel, and she's going to be, well, actually, her birthday's coming up this month. She'll be 84, and she knows everything there is to know about this area. She can remember looking across Oak Street and seeing farmland,
What's her name?
Hazel Taylor.
That's my aunt.
Oh.
Is it really? Well, I love your aunt. She's my adopted grandmother. I loved her to death, and I talk to her. I try to call her on a monthly basis to check in with her, and we always talk about the old house and everything, how much she just loved living here, and I miss her dearly, and I need to go visit her. So
yeah, she lives on White Crest Circle.
Yeah, White Crest Circle. She moved off from Bancroft, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I just love her to death.
She's full of history now. She can tell you, plowing a mule all day, and
that's right.
She sure can.
I love it.
We know somebody's got to bring their aunt to the show now.
Yeah, I'd like to get her to come.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Arnold, I got a question. She said deeds were 1920. Deeds does not necessarily paint the picture of how old the house is. Is that true?
No, it does not always. Sometimes it will mention buildings in the deed, but very seldom does it do anything but mention the ownership transfer, and you can tell the date. It'll give you the date and everything. And if you kind of know what the value of stuff was at a particular time, you can kind of tell whether it's improved or not.
But you don't know if it's that particular house that was sitting there.
No, you really don't, because in transfer of property, all they're transferring is the land and the improvements thereon. So it really doesn't specify the improvements that are on. It doesn't tell you that there's 3 barns, 2 chicken houses, and 5 houses on it or not. It just tells the land and the improvements thereon. So that's kind of hard to tell a whole lot about that. But, we do have records pretty constant back to about 1865. Prior to 1865, it's iffy whether you can find the original deeds and information here.
Was the deed? I imagine the deed system may have changed from 1838 or 36 when we formed the county to what it is today.
Yeah, those
no computers back then.
No computers back
no
then.
GPS.
And they were lost.
Now we would know that there were buildings and things on the property when the Ocoee district deeds were written, because it would be $7.50 an acre instead of less. It
wouldn't tell what it was.
It wouldn't tell what it was. But now I have found the Indian, the Cherokee evaluations of the properties, like on Otterlifter's farm. I know how many cabins were there. I know how many cabins were on the John Ross farm, Hare Conrad's farm, Henry Candy's farm. All those people that were getting ready to be moved out, they came through and did an evaluation on their properties. And
it wouldn't tell when the house was built.
It didn't tell when. But then I know that there was a... and if they sold it for $7.50, you know that might be the original house there, and you can look under it and get somebody that knows what they're doing, like Russell Townsend and the Paul from the Southeastern District, to look at houses. Now, I want to talk to the people that are listening right now that they know that their grandma was born in a certain house, but you don't live there now. I need that information too to help me build the information that's going to go in this book.
P-Deb, did you have more on your list there?
Well,
we
I
keep
had-
bouncing around here.
I had one more, the Hale place, W.M. Hale. I think that's a pretty old.
Where is that one, P-Deb?
That's over. Is it over on Pleasant Grove?
That's over by us.
Yeah,
Mr. Hale's house over there.
Mr. Hale.
Yeah.
Used to be the county ag county
Is
extension
that
agent.
The one right past the church. If you come down the church and you take the right fork, it's right there on the
Yeah.
left. Then, yeah.
Yeah.
Lenny Hale used to live there.
Haven.
Well, but that was the Hale's house, I believe.
Yeah, the Hale's.
Then Miss Haven lived in it.
I believe so. Now.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, now that's the one I've talked to those folks that Mrs. Haven lived in that house, and then there's a trailer, and then there's a white house with red trim on it, and that was a Haven house. And I'm trying to determine somebody related to those folks lives there in the trailer, and she's going to help me with those. But I'm thinking, that those are pretty old houses. Yeah. And then the Ashley farm on down closer to the creek. Going back towards Harris Creek, there's the Ashley farms there. I think the barns and things are actually older than the house.
Oh, the barns are much older than the house.
And that house burned at some point in time and was replaced. But that is the original Ashley farm from the Accoy deeds. But that's not the original
we
house.
have Ashley's and the Chases down through there.
House fires robbed us of a lot of wonderful buildings.
What they done is they went in and they wired those houses to the current that was coming through the lines in the 40s, late 30s and early 40s. Well, as the power increased, it burnt the wires, and the wires just wouldn't carry the current that was coming through. You can't take an old 1940s radio now and plug it into the current that we have today. Without a reducer on it, it'll blow the fuses in it. So that's a lot of what burnt the houses down was electrical. And you're talking about the old deeds. If you can find the census, you get a lot of accurate information from the census. I mean, the people
Whether
that done
they
the census,
owned or
right?
rent
They
or-
owned how many slaves they owned, how many chickens they owned, how many cows they owned. They tell everything, and how many children they was, and how many they've got, and all this stuff. But talking about the deeds, old deeds used to read, "Go to the top of the hill, and there'll be a pine knot sticking in a stump hole."
Yeah.
And you go
Where
north.
the metal rod is.
You go north to the pile of rocks. Be 3 rocks sticking up, and you go and that's.
Well, down at
Where
Flint,
the old Blind Dog Lake.
Yeah.
down at Flint Springs, it says where the rocks lie in the center of the road. And I thought, what in the world they're talking about? Well, you go down there and there's a historical marker out in this little grass median, and there's these 2 red-looking rocks sticking right there in the ground. And I thought, well, I bet that's the rocks they're talking about in those surveys.
One of the more interesting reading deeds that I've ever run across is a deed that's in Upper East Tennessee, and the property line runs where the fog meanders up the valley at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to determine.
Well, no, the gentleman that talked to me and told me about this particular deed, he was doing leases for a gas company up in that area. And he said he got up and went up there at 5 o'clock in the morning. Sure enough, there's a line of fog that meanders up that valley.
Well, I hope
that
he took a
follows where the
picture
property
because I'm
line
not
is.
going back. Down next to Bachman Home, you got the Pryor Newman house. It's sitting right there on the edge of the road. I mean, it's sitting right on the edge of the road. That has to be, and I know that family has agreed to help me come up with the history on it. And then something about the little cabin that's down on the Easterly farm. It was moved from Bendabout Farms. Jack Easterly was born there. I mean, when it was over on Bendabout. And so
that's why they moved it.
That's why they moved it. But the funny thing about it is they've refurbished that house. It has no modern, I mean, they put electricity and stuff in it, but, they didn't change it very much, and there's no TV in it or any of that kind of stuff. But when you walk in, although they've done all that remodeling, you can still smell the ham. P.W. Blatty, that's what I'm talking about, because you can smell the smells of living are in those walls.
Today, there's what they call no man's land. there might be a little section of a half acre over on this side of the road that when this road was cut through, it left that. That's no man's land. Nobody owns it. And you get into a lot of deed problems. I know I helped sell the Seaton farm out, Seaton place out on Harrison Pike, and they was a little tract of land across Harrison Pike that when they built Harrison Pike through there, it left a 20-foot section in there. Well, they like to never got the deed straightened out on that.
That is the bane of our mappers department's existence, is those little slivers of land.
No man's land.
That nobody ever takes care of the deed work on to make it all legal and proper. Because you'll find out somebody will own a little sliver of land somewhere on the other side of the road because the road has changed over the years.
Yep.
And nothing's been taken care of.
No man's land.
Make it right.
On Harris Creek Road, where you pass under the interstate, I know that over on the east side, the house is not old, but the outbuildings are old there. And then you see Mr. Gilbert's Fence Company, and the house there on the right-hand corner. We think that the High Singers
live there.
There.
Yeah.
And that house is
pretty
early,
old.
older than the 1900s.
And the next house is H.C. Baker lives there now.
Yes.
And I was fixing to say something else about in the old days. It's not as much now as it was back then. They used to have what they call Devil's Lane, where the property owners couldn't come to an agreement on the line, and they would back off what they call the line 10 feet on each side and build a fence, and that line was a no man's lane. That was Devil's Lane. And a lot of times they would use that to drive their cattle from one section of the farm to the other, but nobody could farm it or nobody owned it.
What now?
They
who
followed
pays
it.
taxes on it?
Back then you didn't worry about taxes.
Arnold, who'd pay taxes on it now?
Well, today we basically have a lot better information with surveys and stuff like that, but we don't leave gaps like that. You know, it's basically we'll say, okay, this property is designed, description says this property description says this. We'll come to a point, draw a line, and go with it. You know, you can't leave that land sitting out there and not charge taxes.
Have you ever seen those double land?
I've seen a few of those. Seen a few things what we call spot strips, where they'll do something. They'll leave a little strip alongside the road where the person on the other side can't make use to that road for various reasons.
I can take you and show you one that's still the both fence lines are still in existence, but you know they both landowners they don't honor it. They use it for whatever.
If there's a real controversy over that, you know, when they come to our office, they say, we drew the line as best we can. You want to argue about it? There's Chancery Court across the street.
You have to go to court. Yeah,
let them make a decision.
But I thought that was always interesting. I've heard my dad talk about
works.
Devil's Lane. You know, nobody messes with that.
I love it. Well, when we used to live on the farm, my dad'd go out squirrel hunting, and we'd always stroll by where the metal marker was by the old tree, just make sure that the neighbors hadn't moved it. I mean, you know, how far would they move it?
Oh, those iron posts used to walk.
Yeah.
Those three rocks would move. And it was absolutely amazing. It's how I can remember my dad buying where we lived up in Rabbit Valley there. I mean, there was no corners. They always fought over 3 or 4 feet of land, you know. He's over on me 2 feet. He moved that rod again.
Yeah. And one of the other things that you always had to be concerned about, too, was the fence line, because usually you built the fence close to the property line, and if you start to build a new fence, you move it over a little bit and built your new fence.
Yeah.
Now, which side do you move over? Do you move over on your neighbors, or you build it on your side? There's been a lot of property gained and lost by building a fence on the wrong side of the line.
Or, saying that the line runs along a driveway. Well, they come in and widen the driveway and pave it.
That's another thing. That's another thing that happens. The deeds will say go to the center of the road. Well, at that time, the road was a wagon road, one lane. Well, when they double it out, you lose 8 feet of land. But nobody can understand it. Well, if I lost 8 feet here, you go to the other side of the mountain and you get my 8 feet back.
Stretch it.
A couple of houses I want to mention right quick. The Johnson Farm out on Old Johnson Road. I don't know if you're familiar with that. John Johnson owned that piece of property till he passed away a few years ago, and I don't know exactly who's in charge of it now. But he was a former math instructor at Cleveland State that I had occasions to discuss property values with more than once. And very interesting man to talk to, but I do know that the old house on his property is the original farmhouse for the original Johnson Farm.
Is that down on South Lee Highway?
No, this is over off Benton Pike on the east side of town.
There's another Johnson Road down there.
Yeah, there's a Johnson Schoolhouse Road down there, and this is Old Johnson Road off of Benton Pike. But I don't know who's in charge of the property, who's got it or anything now, but I do know he told me.
What does it look like now?
I don't know. I'd say it's in pretty good shape because he took care of it. He was pretty well maintained.
What's this, Ron? Do you know where that's at?
No.
But
I'm trying to think of that one
You
now.
will before the week's out.
You'll know it for the week's out.
Before the day's out.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't know about that one except just my conversations with him. He said this was the original farmhouse that his family owned. And, of course, the Charles Hanna house.
Oh, that's a fun story.
Yeah,
we know exactly when that one was built because it was burned during the Civil War.
Yeah.
And 12 hours after the Civil War was over, they said, we're putting the house back up just to show you, and they put the house right back up. So we know it's 1865.
But, that's on this list.
That's on the list. And, of course, that's part of that Dalton Pike circle because down on Flint Springs Road, if you're coming north from Charles Hanna's house, which is the big gray house, I believe it is, close to the road, there's a Revolutionary War soldier buried on the hill. It's the only Revolutionary War soldier that we know exactly where their grave's at in Bradley County. That farm's been in that family since prior to the county opening up to be Bradley County. We also know that Elijah Steele married into that family. Reverend Elijah Steele, he was fluent in both Cherokee and English, and he worked with the Cherokee before they left. Harvard Steele, that's coming in next week's out of that family too. Robert Steele, that we showed his
Who?
Oh, Snake Man. Okay. But Charlie's house is 1865 or 66. There's one other house there on the Hanna farm that I think is probably early 1900s. When you turn down Flint Springs Road, there's there where the historical marker is. That house is 1930s, but that was the original site of John Ross's original cabin, and it was moved, and a house was built there, and it burned in the 1930s. And Charlie Hanna's dad, when he was 9 years old, helped do the masonry work. He carried the blocks that's on the base of that house. It was the Renner house for a number of years. When you're coming into town there at the Springs, that's another Renner house. It's 2 stories high. A doctor lived there before the Renner family bought it in the 1920s. Flint Springs School was built in 1920. The church has been there since God was a little boy. And then you got the Reimer farm that's right there. Coming up the highway, you have John Martin's house. When you get almost to Waterville School, you have the Westerberg house from the late 1880s. So we have a lot of treasures here in Bradley County that we drive by every day and we think, I wonder how old that house is. And we're wanting to solve those mysteries.
I imagine we lost a lot of when we widened 64 Highway, because 64 Highway, the old Copper Road, at one time, it was a very old road, and so there had to be a lot of houses out that way. But, you'd think there'd be a lot of houses, but water. The older houses had to have a spring.
Had to have spring. Had
to have something in that area, and so, and it's called Water Level Highway, probably for a purpose there. That's where the water level stops.
There's water all over. The
water goes one way on one side of the highway and the other way on the other side of it.
There's a divide there.
We have just a couple minutes here. And, of course, the iconic house here in Bradley County, of course, is the Roth House that sits over by the what's now the old Whirlpool plant on the other side of the depot. We know that it was built by Thomas Callaway prior to the war. Thomas Callaway built a lot of our older houses, and it seems like the next house was fancier and the next house was fancier. I've had too many people confirm to me that, as Jim Edgman did the other day as a small boy, he saw the entrance to where there was a tunnel that went from the depot to the Roth House, which makes great sense since they were bringing in valuable stuff on our railroad in the 1850s, and it needed to be gotten to the house. Mrs. Hardwick, Miss Sarah Hardwick, the oldest Mrs. Hardwick, had a house there too that I've seen pictures of, but unfortunately we've lost it now. Thomas Callaway also built the Hardwick house up on North Ocoee Street that's right above the gas plant there that has recently been remodeled. We know that the Hardwick family moved there during the Civil War, and it was built by Thomas Callaway. Thomas Callaway also built the house out where Wildwood Lake is, and then the Hardwick family owned it. So apparently Mr. Callaway built houses that the Hardwick family liked. So we have just an enormous number of houses
the Roth
here.
house, when did Mr. Roth take over that house then?
Prior to the Civil War.
Okay.
I would think about the time that the railway came into Bradley County.
He owned the copper mine and was one of the richest men, if not the richest men in the state of Tennessee. He lived here.
And the Judge Carmichael house that's next door to the library, that we did the really wise thing and built those two buildings together to make space for the library. I believe it was built by Thomas Callaway too.
Where did Myra Inman live?
Myra Inman lived where her garden that she played in is where the mausoleum is now.
Okay.
Her grandfather was the doctor, and there was a huge house. When I say huge, it was like a hotel-looking house that when you see pictures of the old downtown area, only picture I've ever seen is of the roof, and it was an enormous house that probably covered a quarter of that block. And then it became the place where the preachers and things from the church lived, and it got to be too much to take care of. So they built another building somewhere that the preacher would live in. They tore it down to put the building up.
There was a lot of beautiful old houses in what is now downtown Cleveland, and 90% of them are gone now.
Gone, yeah.
Where Woolworths was, that was another house that looked like something out of Gone with the Wind was there, and it was a Hardwick house. The Prater house was there close. That was a hotel. It was close to First Baptist Church, and we had an old listener that once told me he'd sit out on the porch on Sunday morning.
Wasn't
to
that the
watch
Cleveland Hotel?
Prater Hotel is what the one I'm talking about. It was a Prater's boarding house, and he said he'd sit out there on the porch and watch the folks that he got drunk with on Saturday night going to church on Sunday morning.
You're talking about roads dividing property. On the Jackson farm out there, the interstate divided they've got about 2 acres on the Prospect side, right across from Prospect store there. It just sits there. But now there used to be a big old big house there that had a big wraparound porch that went all the way around that thing. It was but when they built Harrison Pike and the interstate, that done away with
lost
all that.
It changed the.
And we haven't even got to Charleston yet.
No, we haven't even mentioned Charleston.
You're on Old Town Cleveland.
Yes, I had a question for you. I don't even know the name of the road over there next to Magic Shift. They old house sitting over there. I just wanted to know some information about that.
Up on the hill?
That's the Roth house I was talking about a few minutes ago. That has that had the tunnel that ran from there over to the depot. And then I had an elderly man tell me too that it also had a tunnel that came out over there next to the funeral home.
It comes out down there. Used to be where the cab stand used to be.
Cab stand.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you too that
Where they sold the liquor?
I think it was
Okay.
1840s is probably the Roth house.
All right.
All righty. Thank you.
When they were building, doing some work on the rescue center down there, they dug into the tunnel and had to fill it in.
Okay, that's good information to have too.
that's,
I will tell you too that where Cherokee Hotel is now, the Jory, Jory, Judge Jory's house was right there during the Civil War. On what is now Johnston Park, there were 4 beautiful old houses there, and Mrs. Hardwick lived where the old Cook's Food Store is now. And so there were just a whole array of old houses down in there too. Do you remember any of those houses being there, P-Dab?
I remember them all. I remember before they built Inman Street Extension, there's a big spring at the foot of the hill down there, probably under Harris.
It's under the lawyer's office.
It's under one of them down there that they covered up.
Yeah, they pump water out of there all the time.
Yeah, it's.
Someday we want to do a show about springs. If somebody knows about all the springs of Bradley County, they'd have to be pretty informed because there's so many.
Yeah.
Go ahead, caller.
Yes, I was just wanting to say a little bit about the Roth house.
Okay, go ahead.
1833.
All right. 1833, a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Right.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I believe that was Hippie Chick.
All right, folks, this has been a good show here. Arnold, you got anything you want to wrap up here? We got about 200 more houses to talk about. We haven't got to, but Charleston has 15 or 20 right in downtown Charleston that are
We would be
unbelievable.
the stalkers that were driving around in that community last night.
They have not tore down their town like Cleveland did.
Amen.
Amen.
Go ahead.
Just restore those old houses.
Yeah.
There is a tremendous amount of work that went into those houses to build them, and I promise you, if you go in there and restore it back to its original glory and modernize it, I'm not saying don't do that. You get into
Gotta
it,
have internet.
but take off the take the trim work and restore the trim work. Restore the things that matter like that, because that can't be reproduced today very easily. It's very difficult to do, and if you do that, it makes that old house really pop when you put it all back together.
My dad came back from World War II, Arnold, and he was hired by Hargis Lumber Company. And with a handsaw, he and Raymond Ruth went on Ocoee Street, and they rebuilt mantles and pieces of it that if it had one piece missing, they could make it to match, and did all the diagonal windows you'll see in all those old houses down through there.
P-Dab, you got anything close out?
I believe I'm pretty good today. I've talked all I need to talk today.
Ron,
now.
I want you to
Probably
mention the
said too much.
documentary before we go.
Okay, we're going to. And what's the Cat in the Hat thing going on today?
It's Dr. Seuss's birthday up at Cleveland State. It's going on till 1 o'clock. A great place to take the kids. I believe the activities are free.
And there was anything else? The documentary, the Caney Creek documentary, and we're going to have on. That's going to be shown on March 24th at Walker Valley High School at 3 o'clock. It's about a 45-minute documentary. John Cook wrote all the original music for it. So we have original music. We've interviewed 6 people that actually lived at Caney Creek. One of them, unfortunately, even passed away before, shortly after that. It tells a great story. It's my son's first film project he's done, so we're very proud of that. Doors will open around 2:30. You will be able to buy a copy of the DVD, and Deb's also written a book about Caney Creek, predominantly a picture book with stories in it. We had so many pictures talking about people saving history. It is tremendous, and we've tried to collect it all and put it out into that DVD.
In one book, in one
and
DVD.
then what we couldn't even get into the DVD, we put into a book, so that'll be available up there. On the 23rd, we will have a couple of those people we interviewed, and my son will be here, and that will be the program. The Caney Creek and Caney Creek documentary will be our show that day. Next week we have Hayward Still and Robert Cheek coming in. That ought to be fun right there, because those guys can lie.
March 30th. March 30th, we don't have anything confirmed for that, but the 1st of April, Ken Rush is coming back to be with us from Ducktown Museum. They're celebrating their 30th anniversary up there, and we're going to be talking about Ducktown and the mining, and he does a great show. He talks about the miners and what their life was like, and so that'll be a lot of fun.
That's a how many year museum?
30th, I think.
And also, we've talked with a gentleman who wrote a book about the bushwhacker Gatewood, who went through Polk County and killed a bunch up at Madden
17
Creek.
people.
Yeah, Madden Creek. He's written a book about Gatewood, which is a very unknown person here, but we're going to talk about bushwhackers in the Civil War and how they went through the area killing people, and they were, of course,
He'll be coming from
Confederates.
Rome, Georgia.
Confederates were killing those Unions folks around here, and then we also, I think, we're going to talk about Benjamin Cleveland when they're going to dedicate the monument to Benjamin Cleveland coming up in April sometime. I think we're going to come in and talk about Benjamin Cleveland. He actually had although he was not from here, ironically, he had family lived here up on the Walker Valley area up there. So we will talk about that.
And folks are wanting to know when we're going to do part 2 and part 3 of today's show about the houses. And I've got somebody lined up that has remodeled a lot of the old houses, lives in a beautiful house on Ocoee Street, very knowledgeable about the Roth House, and we're going to get him in here probably about mid-May.
So like I say, guys, we may need you back, so start doing your research there.
David May has redone a lot of the houses.
Yes.
Well, David's who we have in mind, and we were doing a food drive, and I knocked on his door, and he invited me in, and Ron's circling the block looking for me, thinks somebody kidnapped me, and I was in this gorgeous house looking at it.
As always, we'd like to close the show. First, we'll say thank you for listening to Old Town Cleveland, and that if you've got old pictures in your house, get them out of the drawers and out of the closet and out of the shoebox and start writing names on them. Take them to your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents. Ask them about their stories. We'll always know about Pearl Harbor, folks, but we may not know what happened down your street in your family. And it is history, and people love to hear the history of anybody's family. You never know who knew your grandparents or your daddy, who shopped at the little store that your mom ran, or who they traded with. And someone may say, well, your grandpa used to come in and shop at my store. It could be the other way around. Tell those stories. Share those pictures. And if you don't know how to share them and stuff, bring them down here. We'll make copies of them, return your pictures to you. We'll put them out on Facebook, and we will try to find the people who know more about it. So, folks, thanks for listening to Old Town Cleveland. I hope the music comes back on. If not, I'm going to play a CD till I get it fixed. So, folks, we'll see you next week here on Old Town Cleveland.
You got somebody.